Hello, and welcome to the Better Business Podcast brought to you by Employsure. I'm your host, Lee Johnston, and in this series, we tackle the big issues in small business with the industry's brightest minds. In this episode, we're taking a look at time management, and we're joined in the studio by management and productivity coach, John Belchamber. But firstly, do you hear that? It's the march of time, which, no matter what we do, seems to just slip away with terrifying speed. There's no denying it. We live in a world where we are constantly available, always connected, and incessantly pulled away from the most important tasks in our personal and professional lives. No matter what, we just never seem to have enough time to do the things we truly want and need to do. But is there something we can do about it? That's what I want to explore for this month's episode. What are the things we can do to better manage our time, to reprioritise our tasks and reclaim our day? One of my favourite quotes about time is actually from children's author Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, who wrote in one of his more famous poems, "How did it get so late so soon?" If you're anything like me, you can relate to that line. Time does seem to fly. There really doesn't seem to be enough hours in the day, and before we know it, another day, another week, another year has slipped by. Examining how we manage and use our time is something that we certainly need to consider. Research suggests that the average person uses 13 different methods and tools to control and manage their time. Meanwhile, just 20% of our average workday is spent on important, high-value tasks, while the remainder of that time is spent on things considered as little or no value. Alarmingly, each of us is interrupted, on average, every 8 minutes, creating roughly 3 hours of wasted time every day. To help us unpick time management, I talked to renowned coach and trainer John Belchamber. John has been training people in the world of time management and personal productivity for more than 20 years and is currently the Chief Development Officer of the OrgDev Institute, as well as Partner and Enterprise Relationship Manager at PD Training. He is a leading authority on management, productivity, and how we can best use our time. He offers some great insight into the power of planning, the importance of clever delegation, and why it's okay to create boundaries around our time. I think you'll really enjoy this episode and walk away with a stack of new ideas. Before we jump in, I just want to quickly remind everyone about our Essentials Update series with employment relations expert Thorin Arnadaughter. Our latest episode tackles the new family and domestic violence leave entitlements and what it means for small business owners. That episode is available now in iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and our website employsure.com.au. And now here to talk to us about time management is John Belchamber. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate you having me here.
I wanted to talk to you about time management. Obviously, time management is a fairly recent concept. What happened to all of our time?
It's interesting, isn't it? If you look back, it's actually not that recent. Going back into the hunter-gatherer days, they say we used to work about 4 hours a day. Once we'd finished gathering, we'd sit around socialising, and then we discovered agriculture, and we then had to stay by the farm because we had the animals to look after, so time got more. But even then, we're really just looking at seasons and sunset and sunrise and things like that. They say that Thomas Jefferson was the first in the 18th century. He installed a clock that had this miraculous thing called a second hand, originally to help him work with his household chores. I'm not too sure how many of those household chores he did himself, to be honest with you. But then Benjamin Franklin, he was the first that coined the phrase "time is money." And I think ever since he said that, we've been measuring time in smaller and smaller increments. So.
It really has changed the way we think of time and how we measure it in our daily lives. I mean, even today we have all of these modern tools and devices that are designed to make our lives easier and help us keep track of time. Why do you think we're struggling to adapt to this more modern shift?
I think there's a whole range of reasons. I think one of the key ones, which we'll probably talk a bit more in depth about, is multitasking. We like to think we're good at multitasking, but the research says we're not. We're not designed to do multiple things at once. We're designed to pay attention to one thing at a time. So I think that's got us, and we've all turned our mobile phones off here today so that we're not distracted by buzzes and hums every 30 seconds. So that's a big one for me.
What are the common complaints you hear from clients who are struggling to manage their time?
Yeah, good question. Number one would probably be there aren't enough hours in the day, to which I say, well, look, we've all got 24 hours. It's just what you do with those hours that's important. People often say, well, I'm constantly interrupted. I would then ask them, well, what are you interrupted by? You're in control of whether you get interrupted. Are you letting other things control you, or are you controlling what interrupts you? And then they say things like, I plan my day, but I never seem to get things done that I wanted to. There's an old saying that you need to know yourself first in order to understand others. And, if you don't make a plan, you plan to fail. I'm a firm believer that the number one thing to do is to understand your behavioural style, your preferences. And once you do that, you'll understand what it is that distracts you and why, and how to motivate yourself to do things. And once you can motivate yourself and others, then it's amazing what you can achieve. So,
I just want to follow up on something you said there, John, around interruptions.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everyone now, in whether it's an office environment or retail or whatever it might be,
Yep.
we are constantly interrupted. What are some of the strategies that you can suggest that might help minimise those interruptions, or if they can't be avoided completely,
Yep.
what can we do to at least manage them a little bit better?
Yeah, a good question again. Look, I think, first of all, it's important to understand what impact interruptions have. When we get interrupted, the researcher says it can often take up to 15 minutes for you to get your concentration back on what you were doing. Take computers. We all work with computers and devices in this day and age. And on average, we're disrupted every 10 and a half minutes by something happening during the day, which if you add that up over an 8-hour day, means you lose about 2.5 hours a day on interruptions. So the first things you need to think about doing is planning to not be interrupted, okay? So first thing, if you've got some work that you need to focus on, turn off things that are going to interrupt you. Turn off your email, shut your email down, turn off any of the notifications, turn your phone off so that it's not going to ring. Then you can actually focus on things. Some of the things you can do is have a do not disturb policy. Use your calendar. Actually put things in your diary, share your calendar so that people can see this hour, I'm busy, you mustn't disturb me. We all work in open plan offices these days. I've seen strategies where people have little red flags that they stick up on their desk which says, I'm busy, please leave me alone. Or even a sign on the back of their chair that says, busy. Our IT department, for example, they have 2 hours a day that is scheduled that everybody knows you don't go anywhere near their door because they're busy focusing on code or something like that. So there's lots of strategies you can put in place that if you communicate them across the organisation can help you, not get distracted.
That's really great advice, John. I want to follow up and see how that might apply to a small business, someone who might only employ maybe 5 to 20 people. What are some of the day-to-day strategies that they could use to help manage their time?
Excellent question. Few things you can do. I recommend having what we would term a huddle meeting every day. So you schedule a time that religiously you have a meeting, 9 o'clock in the morning. It's a 5-minute meeting. You all stand up, say what you're working on that day, what your challenges are, share any information, then you go off. So everybody's focused on the day. They know what's happening and what you're going to be working on. That helps. A great one I like to use is work somewhere else. Go and, I love working in cafes with my laptop and, I'll just go and focus and buy a coffee and sit there and do the work I need to do away from all the distractions. So little things like that. Technology enables us to do that these days. And go to any cafe and I bet you'll find hundreds of laptops with people working away from small businesses.
The things that you've touched on already kind of indicate that we would benefit from having more boundaries around our time. Obviously, we're under a lot of pressure to be constantly available, to be super responsive. Our devices mean we're always connected. It kind of sounds like we would actually benefit more from having some boundaries around our time and giving ourselves permission to say no to those interruptions and those constant requests on our time.
Exactly, yeah. And as I said, there are more things interrupting open plan offices, etc. It's all about, I think, trying as much as you can to have a plan and a schedule and what's allowed and what isn't, giving people permission. We often do a lot of work with teams, for example, where we'll develop a team charter that actually says this is how we will behave with each other, and that'll often include things around time management and respecting, space and needs for privacy. I think, as I said already, working somewhere else or having a room in the environment that you can go to that is a quiet space. There's a multi-million-dollar industry out there now of psychologists and designers that will come into your office and map out how to lay this place out to achieve what you want to do. Interestingly, there's some research now starting to come out that we're moving away from open plan and back into having spaces that people can work in because they recognise, that those boundaries are getting interrupted too much.
So, John, I just want to ask, how do we subtly shift back to creating those boundaries? The way that we work, this constant availability and accessibility has become ingrained into the way that we work. So it could be quite jarring for a small business or their clients, even their own teams and employees, to suddenly say, I'm not available to you anymore. How do we make the start towards shifting back to be more protective of our time?
Sure. And look, small businesses, I should point out that I mentioned that, people are moving away from open plan offices to having offices again. Well, at the end of the day, small business doesn't have the luxury of being able to suddenly build offices again, So it isn't always a physical environment thing that you do. You've got to work with what you have. I go back to, for me, after 20 years of experience in development and time management and all sorts of leadership areas, know yourself is the number one most important thing. If you know yourself, through a model of behaviour, you can then understand other people and you can understand what makes them tick. Now, we don't have time today to go into it in a lot of detail, but for example, one of the models we use has 4 quadrants. It's really easy to understand. I work with a lot of small business owners to help them really get to know how to motivate their team and themselves. And just to give you 2 types, just to illustrate the differences of people, one of the types of behaviour we talk about is a coach. Now, a coach is someone that's all about people and they're all about achieving goals. So they're always driving forward and, they're about taking action, making things happen, keeping the team happy and just driving forward. Now, that's great. That's got strengths, but it also has limitations in time management because they always think they can wing it. They always think they can move towards the goal and, they could turn up today and talk about time management without any sort of practice whatsoever. Okay. So that's one type. The opposite of that is what we would call the advisor. Now, they love detail, they love to plan, they spend all their time on spreadsheets and working out the detail. That's also great, and it has its strengths in a business, but they have a tendency to do what I would call analysis paralysis. They're never ready to do something because they're still trying to get that plan right. Okay. So if as a small business owner, you can understand even just 4 different types of people, who they are in your team, how to motivate those people, and what that actually means for you yourself, you can start to put strategies in place that gives you all permission to manage your time more effectively. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and you're kind of introducing a whole other episode here, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We might have to get you back on for another chat, John, I think, about working styles and personal preferences, which is a shame. I'll continue on with our chat about time management.
Sure, yeah.
I'd love to talk about how we fix it.
Yep.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what small businesses can do to fix this problem around managing their time.
Yep, great. Well, I've mentioned the first one, the behaviour. We'll move on. The second most important thing, I think, is actually working out what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Okay, and then actually setting some goals. Now, by setting goals, I'd like to use a model we call DART Opus. Okay, and DART, D-A-R-T, think of a dart that you throw onto the bullseye on a board, nice and easy visual to remember. The first thing you've got to do, the D, define the goal. What is it? It's no good saying, I want to lose weight. You've got to say, I want to be 75 kilograms. So it's specific, so you know you've actually achieved it. Okay. Announcing your goal. So work out if it's relevant to getting you where you want to be, and then announce it. Tell the world. Put it up on the wall. This is what I'm working towards. Okay. Revise it. Things change, especially in small business. What happened today might be completely different tomorrow. So be prepared to revise your goal. Don't be precious about it. If it needs shifting, revise it, change it. And then lastly, put a time on it. That's the thing people forget to do. I will get to 75 kilograms next year. I went, no, put a time on it. I will do it by the end of this month. Okay. And then when you get to the end of the month, revise it. Okay. So that's actually physically setting the goal. The second part is making sure that you're likely to achieve it, and that's what we call opus, okay? So you've got to make sure that the goal is something you will take ownership of, right? Is it something that you actually really feel passionate about? Will you take ownership of it? The P is passion, Is it something that excites you, that makes you want to do it, or is it something, just going to put it over that to one side? I think it was Brian Tracy that said, eat the frog, and he always said in your day, there are things you don't want to do. They're the things you do straight away, because once you've done them, the rest of the day is great, okay? It's exciting. Everything else is good fun, all right? Urgency. Is it a goal that is really important for you to achieve, or is it something that, down the track? Because if it's just down the track, it's down the track. You're not going to do it, are you? So, and then last, significance. Is it something that is of real significance to you? So setting those goals is probably the first thing that you need to do. Secondly, there's a saying, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. I think lots of people have heard that saying before. But what that means is you need to work out what are the tasks needed to actually achieve your goal. And questions I would suggest you do with each task is, first of all, ask yourself, is it necessary? Is this something I've really got to do, or is it just something I think I've got to do? Okay. Is it really important? Is this something that's going to really impact on my day, or is it something that I can put aside for later? You know, right? Do you have to do it yourself? Classic in small business. Small business owners think they have to do everything themselves, and they don't like to delegate. But at the end of the day, the way you grow your business is by delegating. I think it was Ken Blanchard that said, management is about what happens when you're not there, not what happens when you are there. Okay, so learn to delegate. And as I said, does it have to be done now? Do the things that have got to be done now, and put off the things that can be wait till tomorrow.
I want to ask about that. What are the things we're doing we think are productive and are useful ways to use our time, but actually aren't?
Stephen Covey talks about, the 4 quadrants of looking at, is it important and is it critical? Is it something that is going to really change what I'm doing? Is it going to impact? Or is it just something that seems to be urgent and I'm doing it because everyone's shouting at me louder than anybody else? And so we tend to work on the things that are making the loudest noise, but they're not necessarily the things that are going to make us work forward. As I said, that's about looking at your tasks and working out, is it important?
Does that mean turning your email off for a certain amount of time per day, or turning your phone off, or you've mentioned going into another space like a cafe or a meeting room or whatever it might be? Mm-hmm. Would that allow us a little bit more time and freedom to focus on the important rather than the urgent things that are just screaming at us?
Yeah, you need to have, you need to have a list. So when you finish your day, get yourself into the habit, because forming habits, you have to consciously do them, and you have to think about doing them before they become something that you do without even thinking about. Think about when you took your driving test. You took your driving test and you looked in the mirror, you checked it was in neutral, you started, you indicated, and you had to think about everything you did. I bet each of us drove here today and can't remember what we did on the way, okay? Because it becomes a habit, it's just something you do. So at the end of every day, sit down, what did you achieve? What did you want to achieve that you didn't actually get done? Why did you not get it done? Is that because someone else was controlling your day, or were you in control of your day? All right, and do that every day. Set your task for the next day, which includes quiet time. Maybe I need to go and work somewhere else, etc. Get in the habit of doing that, and you'll find if you do that for 30 days, it'll become something that you do without even thinking about.
John, what are some of the tips and some of the criteria we can use to help us prioritise the important tasks from the urgent tasks, the ones that are stealing our time?
What I would say is there's research that says if something comes into your desk and you can do it there and then, it'll be done, if you leave it till later, it'll take 24 times longer to do it later than if you did it now. Okay. So if an email comes in and you're in your email and it's something you can just do a one-line reply to, do it, because if you go back to it tomorrow, it'll take you a lot longer to do. Okay. Now that's counterintuitive to the tasks, but it's just a way of measuring things for that. I also recommend that you prioritise. We have a B, C, D, E prioritization scale, and A stands for something that is critical or very important. Okay, and that's something you've got to do. There can be negative consequences if you don't do it. So obviously, if there's negative consequences, get it done. Okay, the B stands for important. Okay, so that's something you should do, but it isn't necessarily vital for the here and now for what you're trying to achieve. So it could be put off if you needed to. C stands for the things that are nice to do. It'd be nice if I did this, it'd be nice if I did that, but it's not actually going to impact on your business. So D stands for delegate, and that's something that we need to learn to do in small business. We employ people to do things for us. Okay? A tip I always give new leaders is when someone comes to you with a problem, ask them how they would solve it. Ask them to tell you what they would do to solve the problem. And if you keep doing that, they will eventually come to you and say, this is the problem, this is the solution I think we should do, is that okay? And you can say yes or no, and you've saved a lot of time. So you're actually taking away what they call learned helplessness in people, where they always come to you just because they think they have to. And then E stands for eliminate whenever possible. Okay, so there's a load of things in your day that you do, but you don't really know why you do it. It's just a habit. Stop doing them. I find in my inbox I get a lot of these emails that actually ask me something, but no one ever follows up on me. If I don't reply, no one ever says to me, "You didn't respond to that email." Next time that type of email comes in, I just don't respond to it because it's obviously not important for whoever it was that sent it to me. So.
John, I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier in the interview around how people are now thinking about redesigning office spaces to limit interruptions. How big a role does environment play in our time management and the way we approach our tasks, our work, and how regularly we're interrupted? It's
obviously very important, and I go back to that behavioural thing again that I've said is the most important thing. My style of behaviour, I'll work anywhere, and I've got 3 children. Well, in fact, they're all now grown up. So I'm a dad of 3 children. I don't know if you've noticed, but dads are really good at turning off their ears and not getting distracted by anything when it comes to their kids wanting things or their wives wanting things. So they need to practice that skill sometimes in an office environment, okay? But there are people that cannot work unless they're in a soundproof room with no windows and no natural light. And if that's the type of person you've got, well, then that's what you need to give them. That's the environment they need to work. So I go back to it's the design of your office and working space. Trying to make everybody work in the same way, in the same space, is not necessarily going to work.
So time management isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. Every employee, every single person is going to have a different way of approaching their work and managing their time, and it's about giving them permission and the license to be able to do that.
Exactly. I think number one, you've got to help them understand, what it is that they need. Number two, you've got to give them the tools that that will help them work in the most efficient way possible. And there are a lot of tools out there these days that do things. I mean, how many of us use Outlook, for example? Well, Outlook's probably the most popular email thing, but what people don't realise, it is also got excellent skills for calendar usage. It's got excellent task management. It's got excellent team sharing communication tips in there. It's got lots of automation tips. You can set up rules to respond to emails for you, and people don't learn how to use these tools effectively. So spend a bit of time getting to know the tools you have, how to use them, and use them in a way that works for you.
Are there any tools that you personally recommend that you rely on day to day?
Yeah, well, Outlook is a big one. I use it religiously. I've got 3 calendars running at the moment. I've got 2 business calendars. I've got a family calendar for sharing family events, and I've got a personal calendar, and they all sync on my phone, and I know what I'm doing. I use a lot of rules in Outlook and also clips. At the top in Outlook, there's a thing called Actions, and you can set up actions like to respond to an email in a certain way and copy certain people on it and move it to a certain folder. So it'll do it automatically for you. Things like OneNote or Evernote are amazing tools. Most people just use them to write a little note, but there's a whole lot of team sharing facilities in there, task lists, reminders, etc. you can use. Microsoft just launched one called Teams, which is a complete environment for teams where you can share documents, talk to each other, do wonderful things, get notifications when your task you're supposed to do isn't done. They're all in the standard Microsoft Office suite, but most of us don't know how to use them.
Are you aware of any unique or innovative ideas that particular companies or business leaders are using to assist with time management?
Yeah, look, I've seen quite a few over the years. A big one that I'm seeing a lot of more is mindfulness. And there's a whole program on mindfulness as well. But just taking time out to teach people how to reflect for 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be a weekend retreat. If you teach people to take 30-second pauses in their day, it can be amazing on how it'll help them focus on what they're doing. One organisation I know, a charity that we work with, they implemented mindfulness with their call centre staff because if they enter the credit card details incorrectly, that's completely useless data for them and they're losing money. Mindfulness has increased the accuracy of their credit card entry 3-fold. So it's just by taking that time to get rid of the noise in your head.
A 3-fold increase just by using mindfulness. That's incredible. Is there anyone else out there doing something interesting and innovative with time management?
Yeah, look, shared goals is a wonderful thing. I worked with an organisation once where what they would do is every quarter, at the beginning of the quarter, they'd get the team members to stand up and present their personal goal to the team, and they'd have a picture of it. A picture paints 1,000 words, and they'd have a picture of their goal or what it was, and they'd present it and how they were going to achieve their goal. Because if they're working towards a personal goal, let's face it, we go to work to pay for what we do outside of work. Okay, I don't like the term work-life balance because it implies they're two different things. They're not. They're part of the same thing. Okay, so if you can share your personal goals with your team, have your team hold you accountable for it, put a picture of the goal on your desk so they can talk to you about it. All of a sudden you can share, celebrate successes, but relate personal goals back to business. That's what's important at the end of the day, achieving business goals. So that's a nice one, which is vision boards. So have them up on the wall. Pictures. I remember when I arrived in Australia, I had a picture of a house, my dream house, in my wardrobe, so that every morning when I got up, the first thing I saw was that house, and that was why I was going to work. So things like that, can put it on the dashboard in your car or whatever. Things like that really work.
And do you have the dream house now?
Yeah, just moved up to the Sunshine Coast from Brisbane and living right by the beach. I'm pretty happy, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds like the dream come true. So we've covered a lot of territory already, and there's probably a whole season just around some of the things we've touched on, John.
Yep.
I want to just get to the quick wins. Obviously, there's so many aspects to effective time management that can come down to everything from workload to personality style. Can you tell me what are the really simple quick wins that people can do today that will help them manage their time better?
I think I've covered off on quite a few of them, to be honest, but I think it's taking the time out to plan. Have a bit of the morning that you put aside where you map out your day, and do that every day. If you have to do it before you get to the office or in the car on the way, just do it and make prioritising your day and setting goals for the day at the beginning something you do without question, and then at the end of the day, go back to that list. What did I achieve? What didn't I achieve? And reflect on why. Be honest with yourself. Was it you? Was it somebody else? Why didn't you achieve that goal? Because that'll tell you how to adjust your day.
And John, tell us, what does your day look like? What is a typical day in the life of John Belchamber? How do you manage your time?
Well, as I said, I've got 3 calendars going on my phone. I've got email coming left, right and centre. I love working in cafes. I spend my life on aeroplanes flying around the country, so I've got pretty good at doing work wherever I need to. It's funny. Years ago, I went to a time management course. It was the first ever training course I went to. I turned up and the trainer arrived, said, "I'm ever so sorry, we'll be starting 20 minutes late because I forgot the video." And funnily enough, I didn't learn a thing that day because I didn't listen to them. Okay, so I think you've got to practice a little bit about what you preach. As a small business owner, if people see you living the time management dream, they'll follow you. But if they see you not doing what you're trying to get them to do, well, they're not going to. That's just life.
And John, without naming names, can you share any time management horror stories with us?
Well, obviously the trainer turning up without his time management video was a bit of a horror story. We have a bit of a running joke in the PD training office whereby we get people ask for a quote for time management training. And the running joke is that will take months to close because people never get organised enough to book the time management training, which is a nice paradox, I think. Yeah.
John, thanks so much for your time today. Before I let you go, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received and why?
There's a lot. One that's stuck with me for 20 odd years now, I think, is a saying that it's not what we say but what we do that defines us. I think it's originally from Batman, but I'm not a movie buff, so don't hold me from that. But to me, what that actually means is, we can say wonderful things, and I've spent my life in sales. I'm very good at saying things. But what people remember is what we actually do and how we make them feel. Okay, so think about that every day and just think, well, it's what I do. And that's really relevant to time management. I can say I'm going to do stuff, but until I actually do it, it means nothing.
John, that is such wonderful advice. Before you go, where can we learn more about you and your work, particularly with PD training? And I understand you've also got a special offer for our listeners as well. Yeah, we do. You can find me on LinkedIn, John Belchamber with 1 L. There's common to have 2 L's in the name Belchamber, and there's pdtraining.com.au. And I also run an organisation called the OrgDev Institute, especially for HR people, which is orgdevinstitute.co. But I'd like to make an offer, if I can, to listeners of the podcast. Of course. I said the number one thing was to know yourself in order to understand others. So we'd like to offer all of the listeners a free behavioural profile. It's an online profile. It'll take them about 12 minutes in order to get a range of reports that they can look at of themselves as a leader, as a salesperson, emotional intelligence, a whole range of things that they'll get advice on. And obviously I happen to know a company that will help them implement things with that if they want to. What they need to do is go to the URL psychometricprofiling.org
/start. And I understand you'll send this URL out in the newsletter that people can subscribe to.
Yes.
And then they need to enter the magic code business. Okay? They'll be asked for an 8-letter code, and the word is business. And then they will get access to a free profile.
A wonderful offer and a great way for anyone to start their time management and professional development journey. John, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Lee.
Well, ironically, that's all we have time for. Hopefully you walk away from today's chat with John Belchamber with some useful ideas into how to better manage your time so we can all get the important things done. Before I go, don't forget to make the most of John's offer code to get your very own free personal profile report. That link again was psychometricprofiling.org/start, and the code is business. That's it for this episode of the Better Business Podcast. A huge thanks again to our special guest, John Belchamber. And if you need any help with your workplace and industrial relations, or just have a question about your obligations as an employer, visit us at employsure.com.au. I'm your host, Lee Johnston. Tune in again next month when we tackle another big issue in small business.